These last few years have made us question everything. Our relationships, our jobs, what constitutes an office, and who we are. In a world filled with chaos, confusion, and uncertainty, it's time for some clarity. It's time to start understanding one another. It's time to start understanding ourselves. We envision a world where everyone knows their why. But even more, we envision a world where everyone knows their WHY.os. Their why, their how, and their what. The operating system that drives you, that lets the world know where you stand, what your unique gift is, and most importantly, who you are. WHY.os. Are you ready?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Why Not Wednesday. I am so excited to introduce you guys to our guest. I just finished talking to her in the pre-show, and I was so excited to talk to her because I've been talking about her all weekend to my daughter, who I visited in Chicago, and that song in the background is her walk-up song, and it is a song that she chose. We're going to ask her about it, but let me tell you about Hannah. She is a highly sought-after corporate leader and management professional, specializing in the management and prevention of burnout of professionals. We're going to talk a lot about that. She's the CEO and founder of She Shatters. She draws on her experience consulting and coaching corporate leaders to provide employees at the mid to high point of their careers with the support they need to burn brightly without burning out. And isn't that what we all want to do? Don't we all want to burn bright instead of burn out? Prior to founding She Shatters, Hannah spent 20 years as an executive in the healthcare industry, a role in which she faced immense pressure and witnessed her colleagues suffering the effect of burnout in mass. So we're going to talk a lot about that. That's kind of her mission. So let's welcome Hannah Austin. Hannah, welcome.
Hi, Jan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on. I love that you shared your walk-up song. Tell us a little bit about it, and let's turn that down just a little bit so we can hear Hannah.
Well, I chose this song specifically because it speaks to a moment in your life that's your darkest moment, and taking that dark moment and turning it into what's next for you. Essentially your why, which perfectly aligns with the theme of your show.
Well, and it's so fun because most of the time, everyone I talk to on the show has discovered their why way before we had. But you've been so busy with your book. You've been touring with your book. You've been doing television interviews. You've been doing podcast interviews. So we haven't had a chance to meet, but I do want to give a shout out to Jill O'Boyle for introducing us. Jill is my good friend from Indiana. So thank you so much, Jill, for introducing us to Hannah Austin. You have such a great story, Hannah, and I can't wait to share it with Y Nation. First thing, that I do on the show, and we just, as I said, guys, she's coming right off for WHY.os Discovery. So Hannah, a lot of our audience are coaches and consultants that work with Y Institute. They work with the Y Discovery. And then we have clients who work with us too. So they're familiar with the why, but you weren't familiar with it that much until we did it. And then we did your discovery a little while ago. So let's go over that so that people know who we're talking to. So Hannah's why is contribute. She believes that success happens when we contribute to a greater cause, make an impact, make a positive difference in the lives of others. Her how is to make sense of things. She's a person who's good at solving problems. She has that unique ability to take in lots of information and quickly say, I know what we need to do. So she's often referred to as an expert or somebody who knows what they're doing simply because she's just a great handler of data. And her what is to find a better way. And isn't that a lot of what I see in the theme as I did research for the show? That is the theme that runs really through Hannah's life. There's a better way to do corporate. There's a better way to be a leader. There's a lot of better ways that you have found, and now you're sharing them. And now, thankfully, you're sharing them through your book.
Yes, it's super exciting. And I've always been an empath, but of course, there's a razor thin line, right, between helping others and helping yourself. And that's what Hello Head Meet Heart is all about.
Yes. Well, listen, what a great feed in into we just this morning I talked about the fact that in my feed I put our job as leaders is to take care of our teams first. And you mentioned in your quote that you weren't doing the same for yourself when you went into that place where you burned out. So tell us about that. What drove you so hard? And as a contributor, you wanted to help others and be there for everyone. But tell us
Mhm.
from your side of it, what led to the burnout?
The burnout, honestly, Dan, started at such a young age. At the age of 21, I was tasked with managing over 100 people. My first job out of college was such a big role. And I had 2 cell phones most of my career, my 20-year career in healthcare. And so I was always on. And honestly, I swallowed the lesson of more, better, faster. Don't let them see you sweat, paddle frantically under the scene. And the reality is, Dan, what I was doing was working. So I kept getting promoted and promoted. And I thought to myself, man, this is working. This is exactly what I wanted. This is, a great career trajectory. But what I didn't really realize was that there was a cost of being on all the time. And essentially, Dan, 20 years later, right, my body said, you're done. You can't do this any longer. And I didn't listen. I kept moving forward. I showed back up to work. I didn't tell anyone what was happening to me, and I just kept going. And ultimately, it led me to almost collapsing in the hospital that I was managing, right? It was a very cathartic moment of my body saying, you can't do this anymore. And then, only then did I just decide to stop.
Wow. So, there's a saying that people talk about all the time. If you don't take care of your health, you'll be forced to take care of your illness. Right. And
Yes,
so you
yes.
kind of had that happen at a very young age. I mean, you've been in the industry for 20 years, but it's a very young age to have some kind of event like that. And you're a young person, you're married, and you're managing a hospital, and you end up in that hospital. How did you deal with it?
Gosh, well, you deal with it by often moving forward, right? Just moving
Yeah.
forward. I think for me, I had the choice of taking a leave of absence or completely retiring from where I was working. And I
Right.
made the decision at that point, and I'll be very honest with you, Dan, and hopefully the people on the line or on watching the show, they can resonate with this. I didn't trust myself to take a leave of absence and not return back to the old patterns. And I know
Mm.
this is a really impactful discussion because I knew myself enough to know that I needed a clean break. I needed to
Right.
take time, not just a vacation, not just taking people to Disneyland, because let's face it, Disneyland is not a vacation, Dan. It is
Right.
not a
Right.
vacation. There's not an opportunity for you to take a break and really reflect on that life
Yeah.
that you want to live. And so
Mhm.
my body forced me to do that. I resigned from my role and I took 3 months off. And I tell you, Dan, I was so bored. I only had 1 cell phone for the first time in 20 years. I
Wow.
felt like I was rudderless. I didn't have direction. I didn't know who I was without my title. And it really forced me to recognize who I truly was and how I wanted to end up my last, 40 years of my life at the age of 41. So I had to do a lot of introspective, coaching on myself and doing a lot of learned behaviors, unwiring those old patterns of negativity of being a workaholic.
Yeah. So what about Dreamlamp makes it your song? Because hey, you're one of the things you guys got to know is Hannah is a speaker, a coach, and a consultant. But what she's really focusing on right now is her speaking because she's so busy with it. Probably a lot having to do with the book, which has such a great message. We want to get into that. But why Dreamlamp?
Well, the title of the song is The Time Is Now. And
Mhm.
for me, and I know many of you on the line and watching this and maybe the replay, there's always something in your mind or your heart where you had a dream that you wanted to do. But
Mhm.
life gets in the way, right?
Yeah.
Life gets in the way, kids get in the way, marriage gets in the way, just life gets in the way in general. And
Right.
for me, it took life smacking me across the face to say, are you really doing what you're dreamed to be doing? And the answer was yes, for 20 years. But there are phases in our life where the time is now to try something new and different. And I call it our ordinary life. We're living an
Yeah.
ordinary life because it's what's expected of us. But
Right.
I really was yearning, Dan, for an extraordinary life. I was yearning for something, but I didn't know what it was or
Right.
how to find it. And I was scared to leave my career behind because I was planning for retirement. Like, why would I walk away from a 20-year career? And I really stretched myself, quit my job, actually started being creative and thinking about what's next for me. And I stepped into this extraordinary life, never thinking I was going to write a book, never thinking, Dan, that someone was going to read the book, and
Right.
never imagining that my book would become a Amazon bestseller. Like, 2 years ago, I was sitting at my desk in a healthcare arena. I wasn't writing a book or even giving, my gifts to the world. So I've done a complete 180. And I sometimes can't even believe this is my life, to be honest with you.
Well, and it speaks to the courage that it takes, because so many people, so many of us will stay in that role because it's what's
Yes.
expected, right? It's what you're good at, right? And so we go back to that ikigai. What are you good at? What do you love to do? What can you get paid for? And how can you help others, right? But just because you're good at it doesn't mean you love it, right? And
Right.
you said like you were really good at what you were doing. You kept getting promoted, but it wasn't what lit you up, and now you're there. I do want to take some time, and there's a few comments I want to make sure I get that in here. Sunny Oregon says Jerry Fletcher says hello, and Des Ryan says there's a huge cost to being on the whole time, and that sounds like that was where you were, and you were managing. Also, you were married. You've had a long marriage to your husband, so you're managing home life and being on the whole time. That
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a recipe for exactly what ended up happening to you if you weren't dealing with it correctly. What advice would you give yourself if you could go back
Mm.
and say, hey, Hannah, slow down a little bit? Because could you go back, if you could go back and do it differently, what would you do differently?
It's so funny you're asking this question, Dan, because I was actually just went back yesterday to the place that I resigned from.
Yeah,
And I did a speaking engagement for them yesterday. So it was a kind of a cathartic moment to go back to my old employer and say to them,
yeah,
here's what I would do differently. And my response to that question is give yourself some grace. People
right,
like me and you, Dan, who are like givers, empaths, we don't get our cup filled until everybody else at the table has had their cup, drank their cup, and is on the second refill.
right,
And I think for me, it was what does filling your cup look like? You hear that all
mhm,
the time, but if it was that easy, then people would do it. So,
right.
how do you actually fill your cup? How do you build in time to your regularly scheduled busy day to do that? And so that's what Hello Head Meet Heart is. It's actually the hows, where I think that's where a lot of people get stuck in their life and don't have accountability, is they don't know how to begin or where to begin.
And there's a fine balance too there, Hannah, and I'm sure you talk about it in the book, because I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek's book and TED Talk, Leaders Eat Last, and you just mentioned it, right? You make sure everyone else is taken care of. I come from a military background. You definitely take care of your troops before you take care of yourself. But there's an important part that even in Leaders Eat Last, Simon talks about. You got to take care of number one, because if you don't take care of number one, you can't take care of everyone else.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? Have you read the book, seen the TED Talk? What are your thoughts on that concept?
I think Simon Sinek has a lot of great things to say. I think I've watched several of his TED Talks. I think
Yeah.
what's missing in a lot of the talks with him and a lot of the book is the how. How do you actually go about the tactics to do that?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I'll be completely honest with you, Dan, I almost thought about not publishing the book because I'm like, I don't want to read another self help book. How many of us need
Right.
another self help book? But the reality is, I wanted to write a book that actually helps. And the feedback that I'm getting from readers is, oh my God, this is a book that I can actually translate to my life. I never really thought about it that way. And I will say it's really important that you have, when you're listening to an expert, it's
Yeah.
really nice when the expert has been through and walked through the fire that you're walking in. And I think it
Right.
helps me from a position of strength that I'm being completely honest and saying, I burned out. I've actually burned out 4 times. Now I know how to, heal myself and heal others. Listen to me. I think it's very easy to sit and just speak about topics, but you actually have to sometimes go through them yourself to have come from a position of strength, to be honest.
Yeah. And there's nothing like that experience, right? You felt it,
Mhm.
you've been in their shoes, so you can listen empathetically and understand what they're going through. I was reading some of your reviews for the book. It's one woman said, Amanda said, I got teary-eyed reading the last chapter, Letter to Myself, when you
Yes.
said that you woke up in the middle of the night and wrote a letter to yourself in your darkest hour. And Amanda said, hey, that was me. That's me. So your book talks to people. What are people going to learn? What are people going to, what's the theme of the book that you have you been hearing from the feedback?
Yes. So I love, Dan, that my intended consequence for the book was that this was going to be for people, professionals who are suffering from burnout. The unintended consequences have been 25-year-olds reaching out to me who are just starting out in their career saying, oh my gosh, these are what to watch out for. Here's how I can prevent it. Then there's also the 75, 77-year-olds who are reaching out to me saying, all of my kids are gone. I'm just retiring. I'm trying to figure out what's next in my life, and I don't want to waste any more time. And so I think, I didn't realize that this book was truly for everyone. I've had to expand my marketing capability, but it's really, really interesting to, understand what is that next meaning for you in your life? What's next for you? And I think the other piece is don't look at a midlife crisis or a career pivot in a negative light. Look at it as a new experience, an opportunity to explore something new. And so that's kind of the overall theme is if you're at a pivotal point in your life, this is the book for you.
Love that. Lynn had a comment for us. Says, I get it, Han. I'm an empathic, have some psychic abilities. I'm a supporter in gratitude training language, and he has a why of contribute. So managing his energy is one of the most important things he can do for himself. One of the challenges that I know those of us with the why of contribute have is saying no. If someone needs help, we say yes. You mentioned it earlier. You're going to fill everyone's cup before you fill your own. And a lot of times, and I'm sure this probably was a challenge for you, we talk about it in our coaching, our coaches who coach on the why of contribute, we talk about the fact that one of the first things we have to tell contributors is, hey, you've got to learn to say no. And no is a complete sentence. You don't need to explain it. You can say no. You can say, hey, it's not a priority for me right now. Here's someone else, because we always have to find a nice way to say it, right?
Yeah.
So no, I can't help you, but here's someone who I think can. Let me connect you with someone who probably can help you with that problem, but it's not something I can take on right now. What is a way that you've managed to be able to say no so you can concentrate on the big things that make a big difference for you?
Yeah. So, that's kind of an overused, learn how to say no, that type of thing. These are all things that we've heard over the years that frankly, we're tired of hearing. I have a little bit different take on it. And it is, on Sunday before the week ahead, Dan, I actually plan into my schedule, who am I going to help this week? I've already met with 10 people a day, so I know specifically who's going to be asking me for something. I ask deeper questions. So if you were to come to me and say, I need your help with XYZ, I'd ask a couple clarifying questions. And a lot of the times the things that you're asked isn't what that person really needs. So I do take the time and suss out what specifically they need and whether that's connecting them with someone else or changing their ask, right? Pivoting it a little bit or saying, no, but I can do it in April. I can do it in May. I think sussing it out, people just want to be heard and they want to be validated. And so giving myself time in my schedule to actually look through those people who are asking for help. And then an extension is looking for those people that aren't asking for help, but actually really need it. And I was one of those people, right?
Yeah.
I was very positive. I have a kind of a strong personality. I'm typically very fun, and I was a good faker. And so for anyone watching this right now, I think that, lots of us are good fakers and we don't really show what's underneath the surface. And so I think learning that skill, Dan, and training yourself on kind of sussing out those fakers is really important to know who you're going to spend your time on and who you're not.
Desiree Garcia talked about the fact that, hey, a full an enthusiastic yes or enthusiastic no is better than a half-hearted yes. Right?
Yes.
It's a no. It's a heck no. I can't do it.
Right.
Versus a half-hearted yes. Because how many times do you remember? And I'm gonna ask a question. I don't know if this is applies to you. Do you ever remember saying yes to something and then kicking yourself for saying yes to it right after? And especially when we're younger, right? Like, gosh, why did I say yes to that? Now I've got all this work I've got to do to get ready for that event or that charity or that thing that I volunteered for. I don't know if you ever found yourself in that position, especially as you were climbing that corporate ladder and you were being asked so much.
Yes. And I think it's what I alluded to before is learning how to utilize that ask your questions muscle, asking the right questions. And I think that basically, whether you're reframing that or, referring it or whatever you're doing, it's really important that you're understanding what are you actually being asked And I'm very direct. I say, what is it that you want from me? Right? And what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And why am I the person that you think, would be am I the best fit for this? I mean, asking kind of just those 3 questions will honestly save you a lot of time. And what I really found, Dan, was a lot of people who ask for things, they don't really know what they want. They may just kind of be venting or whatnot. And that will save us as well as you time to be able to figure out what's the right way to handle this situation and how can I protect my energy.
Man, that is pure gold, Hannah. I hope Joe Ake, you captured that, because we got to use that as a clip. Joe Ake also says FOMO posers, fear of missing out posers. And I'm gonna put you on video by yourself, because I got to show Raymond Kemp's comment. It's really good.
Yes. I think reframe is really the key. I love that, Raymond. Thank you.
We'll hide that because that's such a big comment, but thank you so much. The listening is so important, really listening. And I think one of the things you've said it a couple of times, it's listening and then asking deeper questions. Is that really what you're looking for? Am I really the solution you're looking for? One of the things my first coach ever said to me, he said, Dan, the reason you got to learn to say no is because you're making a little difference in a lot of places. And you want to be able to make a big difference in a few places where you're going to feel more fulfilled as a contributor. You feel good when you made a big difference. You don't feel good when you make a little difference or nobody even notices what you did, because you're making such a little difference because you're spread so thin. And that's been something that I've always remembered. And I love Dez's, if it's not a no, but a no for now. And you did a great job. Even when we met through Jill, I think we met probably in February, but you had the book. I remember because I wanted to be one of the first ones to buy the book, and then I didn't buy it, and then I wasn't the first one to buy it on Amazon, but because I don't read the electronic. I think when we met, so you only had the electronic version, so that's been so long. So what a great job of living what you teach, practicing what you preach, because you literally say, hey, Dan, I can't do this till maybe March sometime. So March 22nd, we put it on the calendar, and here we are. I want to talk about your mission, your vision, and your passion, because they're really cool. And then just get your thoughts on it and tell us what it means. Your mission in life is to help busy women pass the torch, reboot, and recharge. Where does that come from, and what does it mean?
Well, the mission comes from me not doing it myself, right? I mean, knowing that there was a better way, hence my why, and wanting to save women and men. So this was my mission, 2 years ago when I first started She Shatters. I have to say that, a lot of my clients are men as well. So I'm going to be specific in relation to that. But, pass the torch, reboot, recharge. I'm a big proponent. And like I just mentioned before, and Raymond underscored that if you can practice these things and preach them as well, I also think in your 40s and your 50s and 60s, kind of that later part of your career, your job to the world is to teach other people to do the same thing. Because if something happens and I'm no longer here on this earth, Dan, or you're no longer here on this earth, what is the legacy that you're leaving for those 20-year-olds, those 30-year-olds that we think don't want to work, right? We have to teach them that work ethic is important. We have to teach them why you should say no, not just say no, but why and how. And so my mission is really tapping into the why, but taking that a step further and figuring out how can you translate that to yourself and the rest of your career and your life, and then also fostering that for the generations ahead. Because I'm very passionate about teaching others so that they don't have the headache that we do, right? Why don't we teach them things? So.
Absolutely. One of your passion, I want to talk about your passion, because you have a team, a group of collective women who have been where you are right now and carved out a path to find our way back to a life of balance, brilliance, and brightness. And I saw the picture. What a great picture. You got a great team. Everybody looks happy. It sounds like you're in a great place. So tell me about your team. How what's it made up of? It's collective women who have been where you are right now, but tell us a little bit more about your team, how you built the team, and what's the mission for that team?
Yeah, so I think the picture you're referring to are certainly on my website. I will say that where we are now versus where we were 2.5 years ago, right? It's if, as an entrepreneur, you're ever evolving.
Sure.
At this point, I have contracted employees, to be very, very specific. But the women in the photos are the women that helped me stand up this company. And I want to be very, very clear in that. When you are a new entrepreneur starting out, I don't know if we have any entrepreneurs on the line. It is
you might
really
have
important.
a few.
Good. It is really important that you collaborate with others and
Yeah.
ask people, especially your clientele, what is it that you want me to build? I think often when you're in the corporate world, and I know you can get this, Dan, after being
Yeah.
told what to do, getting in the policies and procedure, being in a regulated industry, there's not that innovation or creativity or
Right.
even marketing, right?
Yeah.
You're so disciplined of what you can and can't do. There's not a lot of freedom. And so when I started to build my company, what I really wanted to do was I didn't want to build products or a service that I was just building in an office somewhere. I
Right.
wanted to build my community in public. And I wanted to ask my clients, what do you need? And I think the biggest piece was that we've done really well at She Shatters. And what I've really tried to do as a CEO is say to women and men, what do you need to get out of burnout? What tools, what
Yeah.
partnerships? And that's what's been my North Star. And that's when I decide if I'm going to say yes or no to something, that I look on my North Star board and say, does this contribute to the mission? And does this support my customer? So I know no matter what industry you're in, what entrepreneur you are in each different industry, this is really kind of baseline information that you've got to know what your customer wants, but why build something that you don't know what they want, right? Don't do it in private, do it in public.
So I'm gonna, yeah, perfect answer. Thank you. But as a contributor, I just heard you say your first filter is, does it contribute to the cause? Right? Does it make a
Yes.
difference? So that's your first filter. I'd add a couple of filters for you, and these are new to you. Does
Yeah.
it make sense? Does it solve a problem? Because your hows make sense. And is it better than what we're already doing?
Yes.
Because what we
Yes.
find, and Raymond Kemp is on here, and we've got a few of our other coaches on here, we always talk about, it'd be your WHY.os kind of becomes your filter. And so I love that you subconsciously just spoke about it. Does it contribute to the mission? Hello, Head, Meet Heart. Great title. I mean, Larry Levine talks about it. I think and I can't get the exact measurement. It's 18 inches between your head and your heart. It's a small distance, but man, there's a lot to be covered there. Why that title? What's the message? I mean, I can imagine, but I want to hear it from you, Hannah.
Yeah. So Hello Head Meet Heart was it was actually a chapter that I was writing with the title of the chapter. And I will be completely honest, during writing this book, I had a setback. I was almost back to burnout again, right? Going
Yeah.
back to those old patterns. And I really had just a deep conversation with myself of, am I writing this book for informational purposes, educational purposes? Is the reader really going to get how painful burnout is, how painful change is? Am I going to be myself 100% in this book, Dan? Or am I going to just put out fluff? I mean, that was the true conversation I had with myself. And then when I started incorporating, Dan, my personal journals, like my deepest, darkest, most intimate thoughts, and put them in the book, that's when things clicked into place. So what I did there was I didn't just use my head to write a book. I enacted and, activated my head and heart together. And that is what makes Hello Head Meet Heart. I think a lot of people too function in one camp or the other. The analytical folks, the operational folks, the marketing folks. And true brilliance comes from activating those emotions, activating those parts of yourself, and it provides an extraordinary life. And that was the whole goal and plan for the book.
Wow. Thank you so much. Here, we can't let you go without asking the big question. So tell us about your biggest why not moment, a time you said why not to something and it's turned out well. And you're so glad you made that decision, but it was a tough decision at the time, but you're glad you did it now. Well, what's been your biggest why not moment so far?
Pushing send on uploading my book to Amazon. First of all, putting your 100% vulnerable self for the entire world to see was a really big moment. And then, to be honest with you, putting the goal out there that I was going to become Amazon bestseller. I have always done really well in my career, but it was based on hard work. And this book was based on heart and hard work. And those are two different things. So for the first time in my life, Dan, pushing submit to Amazon or getting it out into bookstores, that was my moment where I put all the chips out on my table. I bet on myself for the first time in my life and said, I'm going to become Amazon bestseller in 1 month. And I did it in 10 days.
That is amazing. And you just said, I love the distinction between hard work and heart work. And Larry Levine is going to just love that you said that, because he's going to ask you about that. I know you're going to be on his podcast soon.
Mm-hmm.
So Hannah, any parting words for our audience? You're talking to some coaches, you're talking to some CEOs, you're talking to business owners and entrepreneurs. What's one takeaway you want them to take from today?
Yeah, great question. So, what I would say to all of you listening or listening to the replay is no matter if you're coach, entrepreneur, or anything, we all are human first. And we all have a dream or something that we've always wanted to do our entire life, but that's been weighing on our head and our heart, but we haven't been able to move forward in that. And so, my plea to you is take the leap, take the chance, and don't settle for an ordinary life, and instead explore an extraordinary one.
That is fantastic. Hannah, what do you say we end the show on that note?
Sounds great. Thank you for having me, Dan.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Have a great rest of the week. Best of luck. Continued on the book tour. I know you're busy speaking, coaching, and consulting. And folks, we're going to post this on LinkedIn. It's going to be on Facebook, and it's going to be on YouTube. We'll have some links in the chat. Please get a hold of Hannah's book. I know there's a reason it's a bestseller. It's resonating with so many people. Hannah, have a great rest of your week. I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for a good day.